to do a bit of a history lesson tonight. I found this article in Consortium News from Marlene Daut. I'm sure that's
Daut.
Frenchese. But Marlene Daut on Haitians' push for reparations for France's 19th century gunboat deal to compensate former enslavers rather than the other way around. Now, Collin, you might be more knowledgeable than I on the history of Haiti. Do you know anything about this? About a gunboat deal and former enslavers being compensated?
I actually do not. So this will be
we're gonna learn.
A learning opportunity for me too.
If we go 200 years ago, we're gonna look at France. So in 2002, first of all, Haiti's former president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, I hope I got that right, argued that France should pay his country $21 billion. I think we might have covered a bit of that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we have.
So the reason in 1825, France extracted a huge indemnity from the young nation in exchange for recognition of its independence. So this is this exploitation, right? So April 17th, 2025 marks the 200th anniversary of that indemnity agreement. Thus why it's recent. But on January 1st of this year, the now former president of Haiti's Transitional Presidential Council, Leslie Voltaire, reminded France of this call when he requested that France repay the debt of independence and reparations for slavery. So in March, tennis star Naomi Osaka, who is of Haitian descent, added her voice to the chorus in a tweet wondering when France would pay Haiti back. As a scholar of 19th century Haitian history and culture, I've dedicated a significant portion of my research to exploring Haiti's particularly strong legal case for restitution from France. The story begins with the Haitian Revolution. France instituted slavery in the colony of Saint Domingo on the western third of the island of Hispaniola, today's Haiti, in the 17th century and the late 18th century. The enslaved population rebelled and eventually declared independence. In the 19th century, the French demanded compensation for the former enslavers of the Haitian people rather than the other way around. Sound familiar, Care Bear?
It's plenty.
Yeah. So, just as the legacy of slavery in the United States has created a gross economic disparity between black and white Americans, the tax on its freedom that France forced Haiti to pay, referred to as an indemnity at the time, severely damaged the newly independent country's ability to prosper. There seems to be a pattern with that. Haiti's officially declared its independence from France on January the 1st, 1804, and October 1806, following the assassination of Haiti's first head of state. The country was split into two, with Alexandre Pétain ruling in the south and Henri Christophe ruling in the north. Despite the fact that both Haiti rulers were veterans of the Haitian Revolution, the French had never quite given up on reconquering their former colony. In 1814, King Louis the 15th, 18th. That's how Roman numerals work. XVIII. That should be 18th. Restored as king after the overthrow of Napoleon earlier that year, sent 3 commissioners to Haiti to assess the willingness of the country's rules to surrender. Christophe, crowned king in 1811, remained obstinate in the face of France's exposed plan to bring back slavery. Threatening war, the most prominent member of Christophe's cabinet, Baron de Vestaing, insisted our independence will be guaranteed by the tips of our bayonets. Sound familiar?
Yep.
Nothing like violence to get your shit across. But in contract, Pétain, the ruler of the South, was willing to negotiate, hoping that the country might be able to pay France for recognition of its independence. In 1803, Napoleon had sold Louisiana to the United States for $15 million. Using this number as his compass, Pétain proposed paying the same amount, unwilling to compromise with those he viewed as runaway slaves. Louis XVIII rejected the offer. That's why you don't fucking capitulate to power, you dummy. Pétain died suddenly in 1818, but Jean-Pierre Boyer, his successor, kept up the negotiations. Talks, however, continued to stall due to Christophe's stubborn opposition. So there's Christophe right there in his lovely little band uniform. I like it. Determined to gain at least suzerainty over the island, which would have made Haiti a protectorate of France, Louis XVIII rebuked the two commissioner Boyer sent to Paris in 1824 to try and negotiate an indemnity in exchange for recognition. On April 17th, 1825, Charles X, brother to Louis XVIII, and the new French king performed a sudden about-face. Charles X issued a decree stating that France would recognize Haitian independence, but only at the price of 150 million francs in 1825. I wonder what, that is actually worth now.
Billion.
On nearly twice the 80 million francs, right? Twice the 80 million francs the U.S. had paid for the Louisiana territory. So that's from Louisiana up into the Great Lakes, right?
Lakes, yeah.
For less,
more land.
Yep.
Way more land. They paid less money.
Yep. So,
because God forbid that, the Native American tribes.
Yep.
Like they had some sympathy for them versus
right.
not charging them versus the black people on half an island.
Yeah. So Baron de Macau, who Charm X sent to deliver the ordinance. So here's how he came up, right? How would you come up asking your boy for money he owes you? Right? That's essentially how this happened. 14 brigs of war carrying more than 500 cannons showed up in Haiti, being like, where's our motherfucking money? All right? His instructions stated that his mission was not a negotiation. It was not diplomacy either. It was extortion. That is, I do believe how they talk about it. Although some people claim it's insurance. You wouldn't want anything bad to happen to little old Haiti, would you? So amid the threat of violent war and a looming economic blockade, on July 11th, 1825, Boyer signed the fatal document with gun to his head, which stated the present inhabitants of the French part of Saint Domingo shall pay in 5 equal installments the sum of 150 million francs, destined to indemnify the former colonists. So,
you know what? I will say this now, because I said this to you last night as we were prepping. I was in a Twitter space a couple of nights ago, and we were talking about France. And I think the guy Middle Eastern, but French adjacent, was mentioning how in France, generally if you go to France, they're very particular about foreigners in terms of you coming in, respecting the culture and all that kind of stuff, and they do everything they can to preserve the culture in terms of the language, the food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And kind of as an aside to that, several years ago I went to Belgium, and I stayed in Antwerp, which is in the Flemish part of the country. So that's the Dutch German part. And I wanted to go to Brussels, meaning that's the capital. But in Brussels, that's the southern part of Belgium where they speak French. So my friends who I was staying with at the time were like, well, do you speak French? And I was like, I took French in middle school and high school, but not enough where I'm able to speak fluently. So they were like, if you go, well, they suggested I don't go because they were like, if you don't speak French, then no one's going to fucking help you. So you might as well just stay in Antwerp, at least because they do speak English there. So I would had such a difficult time. but yeah, it's like the idea that the French, are very particular about foreigners coming in their country, and like preserving, like the idea, like stereotypically, like they get mad at Americans for our American ways and all of that.
Yeah.
But in the same breath, so going back to the spaces, so one guy was talking about all of that, but then this guy was like, fuck the French
Right.
because they are coming in and they don't give a fuck about languages of what the indigenous people speak. They're like, no, you're fucking gonna learn French. We're fucking gonna take your shit and what
Mm-hmm.
you gotta say about it. So it's funny, yeah. I think it's funny, you do see this kind of now, like the French have this attitude of almost pompous in terms of, but yet still the colonizers from back in the day didn't necessarily have
Yeah.
that same intent with the countries that they colonized over. So just as a little side, but kind of relates to all of this, in terms of, like reparations, that they were like, no, you're giving us reparations because, like, um, like just
It's just,
ridiculousness, but how that's kind of carried on in the present day
yeah.
in kind of subtle ways in France. So,
Oh, so destined to indemnify the former colonists, right? So, newspaper articles from the period revealed that the French king knew the Haitian government was hardly capable of making these payments, as the amount was nearly 6 times Haiti's total annual revenue. The rest of the world seemed
sounds
to
like student
agree
loans.
that the agreement was absurd. One British journalist, the British, noticed that the enormous price constituted a sum which few states in Europe could bear to sacrifice. So they're like, we couldn't fucking afford that. Jesus. So forced to borrow 30 million francs from French banks to make the first 2 payments, it was hardly a
Oh
surprise to
God.
anyone when Haiti defaulted soon thereafter.
Oh God. This is
Still,
exactly like student loans.
yeah. Still, a subsequent French king sent another expedition in 1838 with 12 warships to force the Haitian president's hand. The 1838 revision, inaccurately labeled Traité d'Amitié, or Treaty of Friendship.
Traité d'amitié.
Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
traité d'amitié. Yeah.
Reduced the outstanding amount owed to 60 million francs, but the Haitian government was once again ordered to take out crushing loans to pay the balance. I just love this extortion. It's just, ugh. It was the Haitian people who suffered the brunt of the consequences. Boyer levied draconian taxes in order to pay back the loans, and while Christophe had been busy developing a national school system during his reign, under Boyer and all subsequent presidents, such projects had to be put on hold. Moreover, researchers have found that the independence debt and the resulting drain on the Haitian treasury were directly responsible not only for the underfunding of education in 20th century Haiti, but also for the lack of health care and the country's inability to develop public infrastructure. And there was something that the Clintons did after that I do remember making this a whole hell of a lot worse. But yeah, so a 2022 analysis by the New York Times furthermore revealed that Haitians ended up paying more than 112 million francs over 7 decades, or $560 million, estimated between 22 billion and 44 billion in today's dollars. Which that little fucking island is not capable of producing that. You know?
Right.
So
half island at that.
Yes.
A third of an island at that.
Right. That has had earthquakes and all sorts of terribleness. But recognizing the gravity of this scandal, French economist Thomas Piketty had argued that France should repay at least 28 billion to Haiti in restitution, which is like he's shooting for somewhere in the middle of that estimate, right?
Oh, he's
So,
saying at least.
right.
So,
Yeah, you probably should do the 44 billion, but
right. I mean, yeah, I would argue shoot for the moon, but
yeah.
he's saying
Ugh.
at least, so.
So this I find funny. A French propaganda engraving from 1825 depicting King Charles X bestowing freedom on a black man kneeling before him in chains. Except this motherfucker been extorting that same black man. Like, kind of
Again,
funny
you know
how.
what? Like, again, I think of college.
Yep.
No, it's like, think of it in that way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they give you a degree and then like, all right, you're off in the world. You do what you need to do, but these loans are going to shackle you for the rest of your life.
It's just like
So,
propaganda
same
today,
thing.
right? You see Trump
Right.
push like, well, now I'm pro-Palestinian. Meanwhile, motherfuckers making back deals in the smoke-filled rooms. So I just propaganda's been a thing for a long time, is what I'm trying to explain. But former French president, from Jacques Chirac to Nicolas Sarkozy to Francois Hollande,
Francois.
Francois, that's it.
Hollande.
Have a history of
Hollande.
Yep. Punishing, skirting, or downplaying Haitian demands for recompense. In May 28th, when Hollande became France's second head of state to visit Haiti, he admitted that his country needed to settle the debt. Later realizing he had unwillingly provided fuel for the legal claims already prepared by attorney Ira Kurzban on behalf of the Haitian people. Hollande clarified that he meant France's debt was merely moral.
Oh, God. So in other words, I meant it symbolically.
I meant it symbolically, bro.
Not literally.
It was just a figure of speech, dog. I mean, when I said I got you, I didn't mean I got you. You know what I'm saying? To deny that the consequences of slavery were also material is to deny French history itself. France belatedly abolished slavery in 1848 in its remaining colonies of Martinique, Guadeloupe, Reunion, and French Guiana, which are still territories of France today. Mm-hmm. Afterward, the French government demonstrated once again its understanding of slavery's relationships to economics when it financially compensated the former owners of enslaved people. The resulting racial wealth gap is no metaphor. In metropolitan France, 14.1% of the population lives below the poverty line. In Martinique and Guadeloupe, in contrast, where more than 80% of the population is of African descent, the poverty rates are 38% and 46%, respectively. The poverty rate in Haiti is even more dire, at 59%. And whereas the gross domestic product per capita, the best measure of a country's standard of living, is $44,690 in France, it's a mere $1,693 in Haiti. The discrepancies can be viewed as the concrete consequences of stolen labor from generations of Africans and their descendants. In recent years, French academics have begun to increasingly contribute to the conversation about the longitudinal harms the indemnity brought to Haiti. Yet, what effectively amounts to a statement of no comment has historically been the only response from France's current government under President Macron. On April 17th, the bicentennial of the indemnity ordinance, Macron finally broke his silence. In official communique, Macron acknowledged the heavy financial indemnity his country imposed upon Haiti and announced a joint Franco-Haitian commission responsible for examining our common past and shedding light on all its dimensions. But he did not.
So in other words,
yes.
Well, so in other words, what is it called? What would we call that here? Shoot.
You remember?
Like when they form committees, but form committees, but
all talk and
study it.
Yes.
What's that called?
I forget. Brain trusting of some kind.
Yeah. Oh, in the
But
chat, you probably know what I'm talking about. So say the word that I mean.
yeah,
So
committees of some kind. But he did not address the question of reparations. Many Haitians were
of
rightfully
course not.
not satisfied. The only
Of
initiative
course
from
not.
France that would really matter, they said, would be one detailing how it plans to provide economic recompense to the Haitian people. So, funny how the international stories make a difference to talks of reparations here. Funny how that works, right?
Right. And this is why, especially in America, we need to talk about reparations, not just in terms of the US alone. Like, we need to be a lot more aware of the need for reparations within the diaspora. Like, that's why I make the case that, yes, I understand that Black Americans have a different culture and call yourself an ethnic group, fine. I totally get that. But there's a lot of commonalities among what is happening in the Caribbean and what is happening here and what has happened to Europe in terms of Black people. So it makes more sense to me to kind of align together and kind of have this discussion. And here's the thing. Because I know you in particular, we've had this conversation, you understand what the belief of Black reparations, but what does that mean in terms of you as a white
Yeah.
lower? I don't want to give you a socioeconomic status like that, but like lower socioeconomic status as a white person. Here's the thing though, like this has nothing to do with you.